Rain makes every courthouse sound older than it is. That morning, even the windows seemed tired. I carried a file so heavy it bent in my hand. Before noon, one honest act would split a room in two. If you've ever done the right thing and still been doubted, stay here with me a little while. Some mornings from my bench still follow me home. Some voices stay in the walls after everyone leaves. This was one of those mornings. I'm Judge Elena Marlowe, and I had already spent 3 decades listening to hurt dressed as facts. The sky outside was the color of wet stone. Rain slid down the courthouse steps in thin gray sheets. Every coat that entered carried the smell of cold air and old worry. The courtroom was never grand to me, no matter what strangers imagined. The wood was scarred by years of rings from coffee cups. The benches creaked like old bones every time someone shifted. Even silence had a sound in that room. My clerk set the file beside my elbow and lowered her voice. She said the city was seeking theft charges. That means they believed a man took money that was not his and meant to keep it. They also wanted fines and fees that climbed past $11,000. $11,000 can look like a number on paper. In real life, it can mean no rent, it can mean no medicine, it can mean a man never catching up again. The envelope at the center of it held $8,000 in cash. It had been lost, then returned. That should have been the end of a decent story. Instead, it was the start of a hard one. The owner sat near the front before we began. Victor Lang wore a navy coat that still held the sharp fold from expensive packaging. His jaw was clean, tight, and set forward like he expected the day to obey him. He kept looking at the door, then at the clock, then back at the door. Across the aisle stood Ms. Dana Bell for the city. She was neat, still, and careful with every page she touched. She did not look cruel. She looked like someone who believed rules kept the world from falling apart. Then the side door opened, and the man from the file stepped in. The room changed before he even reached the table. You can feel that sometimes from the bench. You can feel when a body enters carrying more than its own weight. Samuel Reyes wore a faded gray work shirt under a coat too thin for that weather. One sleeve shone at the elbow where the fabric had gone flat. His pants were pressed with old creases that no longer reached the hem. His shoes had been polished with care, but the soles were tired and peeling. His hands told me more than the papers did. The knuckles were cracked white from soap and winter. The nails were scrubbed clean, yet stained deep at the edges from bleach and floor wax. His left thumb wore a strip of pharmacy tape instead of a bandage. He held himself the way men do when life teaches them not to take up space. Shoulders inward, chin careful. Every step placed like an apology he had not agreed to make. When he sat down, he kept both hands on the table where everyone could see them. That stayed with me. People trying to hide usually hide first with their hands. Samuel looked like a man who had already learned what suspicion can do. His eyes were dark and ringed with sleepless purple. Not dramatic, not theatrical, just the kind of tired that sits behind a person's face and never fully leaves. There was rain on the cuff of his sleeve. There was also dust there, pale and chalky. I knew that dust. It was the kind left behind by stair rails, window ledges, and mop water drying on concrete. Ms. Bell rose and gave the city's version first. Her voice was clear, clipped, and stripped of feeling. She said Samuel found the envelope in the public garage. She said he kept it overnight and returned it only after opening it. She placed the times in a straight line. Found at 11:43 that night. Returned at 7:12 the next morning. A gap of more than 7 hours, she said, and every minute of that gap mattered. She added that the envelope had been sealed when Mr. Lang lost it. It was open when Samuel returned it. The cash inside was complete, but possession still mattered. Intent, she said, can be hidden behind a late act of honesty. Mr. Lang did not look at Samuel while she spoke. He stared ahead and tightened his mouth each time the word honesty was used. Not in anger alone, in insult. I asked Samuel to stand and tell me what happened in his own words. He rose too fast, then steadied himself on the table. His voice, when it came, was soft and rough at the edges. It sounded like it had been used all night and rested none. He said he was finishing his shift in the lower garage. He had a mop bucket in one hand and a trash bag in the other. He saw the envelope near a concrete pillar, half wet from tire spray. There was no name written outside. He picked it up because a car was backing toward it. That mattered to me. Small details matter when truth is trying to stay on its feet. He said he thought it might hold papers first, not money. When he felt the weight, he stepped under the stairwell light. He opened the flap just enough to find a name. That was his first mistake, he told me. He said it with his head down like he had rehearsed the sentence all night. Inside, he found bills wrapped in bank bands and a deposit slip. The slip said Victor Lang. There was also a business card with a cell number. Samuel called it right there from his own phone and got no answer. He waited in the garage for 15 minutes. Then he carried the envelope upstairs to the front desk. The desk was dark. The night deputy had gone to help with a wreck on the highway, and the security office was locked. He called the number again, then once more. Each time, voicemail. He did not know where else to take $8,000 at midnight without leaving it with another empty room. About then, I want to ask you something. What would you think if a hungry man held $8,000 in his hand all alone? Would you trust the paper or would you wait to hear his voice? Sometimes that choice says more about us than it does about him. Samuel swallowed hard and kept going. He said he missed his last bus because he stayed looking for someone in authority. He walked home in the rain with the envelope inside his shirt to keep it dry. He said that part quietly, as if dryness mattered more to him than defense. I asked why he did not go to the police station. He answered without lifting his eyes. He said he had done that once with a found bicycle and waited 3 hours. That night, his wife was home without her insulin refill, and he had a grandson asleep on the couch. That was the second layer of truth, not excuse, truth. He was balancing other people's needs while the city later acted like time itself proved greed. Then came the deeper cut. I asked him how much money he had in his own account that night. He looked embarrassed before he answered. $17.04. No one moved when he said it. Even the court reporter slowed. Samuel said the pharmacy had let him carry one refill too long already. If he did not pay by Friday, they would stop fronting his wife's medicine. He added one more thing, and this is where the room changed. He said his grandson, Nico, had seen the envelope on the kitchen table. The boy asked if they were rich now. Samuel told him no, because money only belongs to you when you can sleep beside it. Those words did not sound practiced. They sounded lived in. He said he counted the money in front of the boy because fear had made his hands shake. Then he sealed the flap with plain tape and set an alarm for dawn. Mr. Lang finally looked at him then, not with softness, not even with relief. He looked at Samuel as if being returned to whole had somehow still cost him too much. When I asked Mr. Lang why he pressed for charges despite the full amount being returned, he answered plainly. He said trust had been broken. He said any decent person would have left the envelope untouched and called police. He said poverty did not change that standard. A low murmur moved through the benches, not outrage alone, division. Some faces agreed with him because rules feel safer than people. I had heard enough to know the file was missing its soul, so I turned back to Ms. Bell. I asked whether the city had brought the security footage from the garage and lobby. She said yes, and the clerk dimmed the room. The screen flickered blue first, then steadied. There was the garage at night, concrete pillars, puddles, Samuel's thin frame pushing a yellow mop bucket through dirty reflections of brake lights. At 11:43, a dark sedan pulled away from the payment machine. As it turned, a thick envelope slid from the roof and dropped near the tire line. Nobody noticed, not the driver, not the two people passing behind the pillar. 3 minutes later, Samuel appeared. He stopped when he saw the envelope. He did not look around like a thief. He looked around like a man checking whether loss had a face attached to it. He bent, picked it up, and stepped out of traffic. He did not tuck it away. He held it in plain sight with both hands. Then he moved under the stairwell lamp and stared at the front like someone hoping a name would appear. The next camera showed the lobby. Samuel came through the side door, wet at the shoulders. He walked to the front desk, empty. He knocked on the glass twice and waited. Then he used a wall phone, then his own cell phone, then the wall phone again. Each time he stood in the center of the frame where any camera could see him. That is not how men hide what they plan to steal. We paused there, and I need to say this to you. Stay with the facts when the facts begin to hurt. That is the moment people rush back to easy judgment, and easy judgment ruins lives faster than any storm. Ms. Bell shifted beside her table, but I was not finished. I asked for the phone record Samuel had offered. The clerk handed me a printout. 3 outgoing calls to Mr. Lang's number within 22 minutes. Then came the voicemail transcript. It was plain and shaky. Mr. Lang, my name is Samuel Reyes. I cleaned the county garage, and I think I found something of yours. I asked whether the city had entered the morning body camera video from the deputy at the side entrance. They had. On screen, Samuel stood there at dawn, hair still damp, envelope in hand. His first words were, "Please count it twice so nobody thinks wrong of me." That sentence sat in the room like a stone dropped into water. You could almost hear it sink. "Please count it twice. Not thank you for taking it back. Not am I in trouble." Ms. Bell tried one more angle. She said possession still mattered because Samuel took the envelope home. She said rules cannot bend around every difficult life. If they do, she warned, order turns into guessing. I told her rules are meant to guide judgment, not replace it. That is not softness. That is the whole job. A law without context becomes a hammer looking for heads. Then I turned to Mr. Lang. I asked if he had listened to the voicemails before calling police. He admitted he had not. He said once he heard the envelope was opened, that was enough for him. I asked whether any money was missing. No. Whether any bill had been switched? No. Whether Samuel ever denied having the envelope? No. So what exactly, I asked, was the theft? The room went still enough to hear rain tapping the high windows. Mr. Lang pressed his lips together and said, "He crossed a line. Sometimes people call a line sacred when they cannot prove harm." Ms. Bell gave her final defense of the rules. She said the city must discourage private handling of found cash. She said returning money later cannot erase improper possession now. Her argument was clean, and it was not foolish. But clean arguments can still cut the wrong person, so I answered just as plainly. A man who hides does not call 3 times. A thief does not ask an officer to count twice in front of a camera. A thief with $17 and a sick wife does not bring back $8,000 at sunrise untouched. That is not a loophole. That is character. And if the law cannot recognize character, then the law is going blind. I picked up my gavel, but I did not strike it yet. Weight matters before sound. I wanted every person in that room to hear the ruling in the air first. Some truths deserve a second of silence before they are spoken. I said the court finds no proof of criminal intent. That means no proof he meant to steal. I said the charge is dismissed. I said every fine and fee tied to it is vacated in full. Then I brought the gavel down once, not hard, just enough. Wood answered wood, and the sound carried further than anger ever does. Samuel did not cry the way people expect in stories. He inhaled like a man surfacing too fast. His fingers opened, then curled under the table, searching for something solid. His chin dropped to his chest, and he stayed there for 3 long breaths. When he finally looked up, his mouth trembled before his eyes did. He pressed the heel of his taped thumb against one eyebrow, not wiping tears, holding himself together where the face starts to split when relief comes too fast. I told him to stay where he was for a moment. My voice had changed by then. Bench voices do that sometimes when the law is done speaking and a person still remains. I asked him, "Samuel, who is waiting for you at home right now?" He said, "My wife, Marisol, and my grandson, Nico, before school." I reached for a small cream card I keep inside my bench book. On it, I wrote the name of our court's family help office and the woman who runs it. I told the bailiff to walk Samuel downstairs after the hearing. I said Ms. Ruiz could help with emergency medicine vouchers and rental counseling. That was not charity from the bench. That was the system finally remembering it has hands, not just teeth. That should have been where the room exhaled. It was not. Mr. Lang stood up so suddenly his chair scraped the floor. He said, "I still would not trust that man near money, and I won't pretend otherwise." The courtroom split right there. A few faces hardened in agreement. More flinched as if something sour had been spilled in public. Harsh words sound even harsher after mercy has already entered the room. From the back bench, a voice I knew rose before I could call the next matter. It was Officer Dean Holloway, retired 3 months and still built like a courthouse door. He took off his cap and said Samuel once found his daughter's backpack on the bus ramp. Inside that backpack, he said, was grocery money and an inhaler. Samuel returned it before dawn and refused a reward. Then a clerk near my right wall stood too. She said Samuel had turned in a diamond earring last winter and never asked whose it was. If this story has touched something quiet in you, don't ignore that feeling. Most lives turn not on grand speeches, but on small moments when someone is finally seen. That is how dignity returns. That is how a room begins to heal. Mr. Lang did not speak again. His face changed, though, not into kindness, into discomfort, which is where truth often starts for people who are used to being right. Samuel left the table slower than he had approached it, still thin, still tired, but no longer folded inward quite the same way. 2 weeks later, the hearing escaped the walls of my courtroom. A local reporter had been there for another matter and wrote about Samuel that night. By morning, the story had moved through phones, kitchens, break rooms, and church steps. By sunset, my chambers phone had more messages than I could return. One woman mailed 3 $20 bills wrapped in notebook paper. A plumber sent a money order for $87 and wrote, "I know what medicine costs." A 5th grade class mailed 43 handwritten notes. Several spelled Samuel's name wrong, but every word meant well. The clerk's office counted 178 letters in 9 days. The help office logged 216 calls asking how to reach Samuel. A grocery store offered 6 months of food vouchers. A pharmacy owner paid off Marisol's overdue balance without asking for his name in return. Small donations came from all over the county. $12, $19, $31, and a note that said, "For the boy who asked if you were rich now." When the help office finally added it all, the total was $14,386. Samuel accepted only part of it. That mattered too. He asked that the rest go to the court's emergency fund for other families. He kept enough for rent, medicine, and a used car with one cloudy headlight. Even his relief was careful. A janitorial company from the school district called him after seeing the story. They offered steadier hours, better pay, and health coverage after 90 days. A mechanic fixed the heater in his old apartment for free. Someone else left 2 winter coats at his door, one child-sized. Mr. Lang sent nothing at first. Then, near the end of the 2nd week, a sealed note arrived. It was short. He wrote that fear had made him cruel and shame had kept him proud. He enclosed a check for Marisol's next refill and asked for no reply. 6 months later, Samuel returned to my courtroom on a bright morning in early fall. This time, the sky outside looked washed clean. The man who stepped through the door was still Samuel Reyes. But life no longer hung from him like wet cloth. He wore a dark blue work jacket with the school district patch over the chest. The sleeves fit, the collar sat straight. His shoes were plain black, new enough to hold their shape, and the leather still caught light. His hands were still workers' hands. You do not lose a life like that in 6 months. But the cracks had healed. The pharmacy tape was gone from his thumb. His nails were still clean, though now they looked cared for instead of scrubbed in fear. His shoulders had lifted, not proud in the loud way, steady. As if he had learned the room could hold his full height without punishing him for it. The shadows under his eyes had softened. His face carried more color. He smiled before reaching the table, then stopped himself, unsure whether smiles belonged there. I smiled first to save him the trouble. He had brought Nico with him. The boy wore a small white shirt tucked too carefully into his pants. In one hand, he held a library book. In the other, he carried a spelling ribbon from school as if it were treasure. Samuel told me Marisol was doing better. Insurance had kicked in. The used car still rattled, but it started every morning. Nico now rode with him to school some days and liked helping unlock the side gym doors. Then Samuel pulled a folded paper from his pocket. It was not a legal form. It was a copy of his first full paycheck from the school district. He said he kept it because it was the first money he had ever earned that felt calm. He thanked the court, but I stopped him there. Courts are praised too quickly for doing what they should have done at once. So I told him the truth. He had carried the hardest part himself. Before he left, he said Nico had one question for me. The boy stepped forward and asked whether being rich means having money or sleeping good. The room laughed softly, not at him, with relief. I told Nico that money helps and nobody should pretend otherwise, but sleep is a kind of wealth too. So is being able to look at yourself in the mirror without turning away. His grandfather, I said, was rich in that way long before the world noticed. Let me ask you something before I tell you what stayed with me most. If your neighbors stood where Samuel stood, what kind of room would you build around them? One that measures only mistakes, or one that still leaves space for mercy to enter? That evening after the docket was done, I sat alone in chambers with the lamp on low. Rain had finally given way to clear, glassy dark. The courthouse had emptied into echoes. Only the cleaning carts moved now, wheels whispering over old tile. I thought about how often people arrive before me already translated into paper, a debt, a charge, a failure. Ink is useful, but it is never the whole body of a human life. The law needs structure. Of course it does. Without structure, the strong devour the weak and call it order. But when structure forgets the human heart, it begins serving fear instead of justice. I have seen wealthy people mistake possession for virtue. I have seen poor people judged guilty by hunger before speaking a word. I have seen rules used like shelter. I have also seen them used like walls. That day reminded me what my job really is. Not to bless every excuse, not to tear down every rule. My job is to look long enough for truth to become visible beneath convenience, because most people are not the worst line written about them. Most people are not the poorest hour they survived. Sometimes they are the hand that returns what it could have kept. Sometimes they are the voice asking to have it counted twice. When I finally rose to leave, the hallway smelled faintly of lemon cleaner. Somewhere below, a mop bucket rolled across stone. I thought of Samuel on that rainy night, holding $8,000 and choosing sleep over temptation. I thought of a boy asking what rich really means. The world does not heal in one hearing, I know that. But now and then, a courtroom can refuse to make a wound deeper, and on rare days, that refusal travels farther than we ever see. I turned off the lamp and stood in the dark for a breath. 30 years had taught me many hard lessons. One of them was this: mercy is how justice breathes.